So we wanted to give a warm welcome to everyone, and we're just going to say a few words of welcome from Marge after we've already had our welcoming ceremony outside, and then we're going to hand things over to our awesome panel. So my job today was to talk about our research, but I'm kind of coming at it from a different angle. So I wanted to just say that we're all here today because we're all activists of some kind. We're all committed to some kind of profound change, whether it's social transformation, ecological transformation. And so we are all engaged in struggles of one kind or another. Against heteropatriarchy, which tries to tell us whose bodies matter and who has power, against racist and colonial structures, against racist policing, the legacies of colonialism, against wholesale destruction of the environment for profit, against capitalism, and I want to say that again, against capitalism, against really the capitalist exploitation of the new flex-exploited precariat. You know, everyone has precarious labor these days, and trying to skim over my notes here. So we're all working from our hearts and minds and with our hands in these struggles to really make profound transformation in the world. And so our research project also comes from that place. We're here doing research, and we wanted to bring people together who do research for activist and social change purposes, and people who do activism and think a lot about it and do analysis in that way. And so what we all know is that in order to make that kind of profound social change, we need to own the media. We need to be the media. We need to be making media. We need to be making our voices heard more strongly than the ones against which we're struggling. And so we need to own the stories and create the narratives of our world and to create our visions. And so I wanted to invite everyone here, because I know you all do this, to just shout out the kinds of media that you're engaged in making. So don't be shy.
Radio, podcast,
print.
Yes.
Live streaming, blogs, podcasts, print, so all these things, radio, yeah, so we all do all this stuff. So this is an amazingly talented group of people also gathered here this weekend, and we're all here to do a small part in confronting all of the painful things that we see going on in the world, not hopefully among each other, but to work together to profoundly change those things that we see in the world by generating alternative voices, and not just to find our voice, because I think that's a bit cliched, but to find our voice, right? This is a big thing that we're trying to do, and to make that voice really heard. And so I guess I just want to welcome everyone under that kind of commitment to values that we share, to human dignity and respect for all living and growing things. And we make media, and these are the values that guide us in that. So welcome.
Okay. Hi. I'm Charmaine. It's a very loud mic, and you'll see me running around all weekend. But I first wanted to thank everyone for coming, and more people will come tomorrow. But I just want to let everyone know that a lot of people have traveled far and wide to come to this conference, and we have folks here from India, from Turkey, from South Africa, from Vancouver. I'm kind of moving in. Anyone here? Oh, from Halifax as well. Montreal, yeah, okay. Florida. South Carolina, yeah. So while you are presenting and also taking workshops, I just ask people to make friends with each other. If you're going to do something, invite someone you don't know out or hang out. I mean, there's not much to do on this campus, so, you know, do lots of icebreakers with each other, trust falls, whatever you do to pass the time. So I'm supposed to give some context to this conference. Why is this conference happening? I got hired on to March as a researcher I'm not a student. I write for a journal called Upping the Ante, and I've been doing community radio for around 15 years and have been organizing with various anti-capitalist groups in the Toronto area. And so they thought I'd be good for this project, I guess, for that reason. And I'm not a really good researcher, but what I really love is theory, and I love activism, and I'm really always trying to bridge those. And so this conference came about because we wanted to do a whole new way of research, quote unquote. We didn't want to be an academic institution who goes to people who work really hard and steal their knowledge. We're really privileged to get a grant, and we really are committed to trying to equalizing that grant, to making opportunities in various communities. So we created a thing called Mixers, where we brought activists together, different media activists together, to talk about what they needed. Because as someone who does media, my project is going to fold next month. And that's how we operate month to month. This is the last issue, just because we're in debt, we're doing this for free, and it's really irritating when someone from the academy comes down to interview us about our experience. I'm like, well, yeah, we make a journal and we think it's good, but we're exhausted, and what more can you say? So this project wanted to give back, and this is one of the conferences that does that. We were able to provide travel and honoraria, and have both panels to talk about the politics of activist media as well as skill shares. And that came out of the mixtures that we did in various cities across Canada that we held in Ottawa, Victoria, Vancouver, Halifax, and Toronto. And one of the biggest things was, other than, well, we actually need media activist centers. We couldn't quite do that, but definitely creating spaces for skill shares. So this is the first one, and we'll see how it goes. Hoping all of us can gather at the end to see if we want to keep going and maybe have our own media activist gatherings every year. It doesn't have to be in Aurelia, if people really don't like it here, but I think it can be too. I think that's all I wanted to say about that. Just to plug just a bit about the research is that we're always looking to partner with different activist projects in a real sustained way, and we've done that with the Media Co-op as well as a podcast project that Annie will be talking about through the weekend. So if you have any ideas about or any desire to talk to us about any sustained relationship or project after this, please do so. You can talk to any of us. That's it.
Hello, everybody. It's really great to see you all here. I have been emailing, as my comrades have been as well, with a lot of you over the last few months, and it's really great to finally put faces to email addresses. So I'm really happy to see all of you. My part is just to give you a little bit more information about the logistical side of the conference. So you may want to grab a pen and your programs to indicate some things. There have been a few last-minute program changes. We are in the process of creating an insert that you can actually just use with your program, and we expect to have that at the registration table, hopefully by tomorrow morning. We also have a QR code in the program on the inside cover, which will take you to the detailed schedule with the descriptions of all the presentations, workshops, skill shares, as well as the bios of the presenters. So in order to access or to use the QR code, you can use your phone and download an app called Scan. That's just one of the ones that you can use. It's a free app. You can download it on your phone, and then you can just point your phone at the code, and it will take you to the link. The link is also available on our website and the Facebook page for this event as well. We are live streaming the conference, not the entire thing because we have parallel sessions, but some have been identified for live streaming. The other ones are being video recorded. So expect that the chair of your panel will come up to you to get a release form. And we are, of course, doing this so that we can share this conference with people who could not be here in person this weekend. We are aiming to have a zero or as little waste as possible created during this conference. This is not a municipality that composts, unfortunately, but we are committed to recycling. And I hope that you have had a chance to pick up one of your fancy glass Marge water bottles at the registration desk. If not, feel free to help yourself. This is a no plastic bottle campus, so that's really great. And of course, there are many water fountains available throughout. Okay, a couple of things about transportation. So we do have 2 socials planned for the conference, the first one of which is tomorrow evening. Starting at 7, that will be the time that the dinner starts. It's going to be at the downtown pub called Brownstone, and immediately next door to it is a cafe called the Think Tank. We have both of those spaces for ourselves. Brownstone will be the site of the dinner and the musical performances, to which we very much look forward to. And there will be a bus leaving campus tomorrow at 6:45 in front of the residence. That's going to take us, those of you who are driving, of course, don't need to catch the bus. For those of us who don't have cars, we can catch the bus at 6:45. It's going to drop us off at the pub location. And then it comes back to campus and makes 3 stops along the way at 3 hotels. So those of you who are staying at hotels can request to be dropped off at midnight. So if you plan to leave before midnight, of course, you're totally free to do so. I understand that some people will be doing this. There is, of course, local transportation, but the last bus will leave the downtown at 10:15. So heads up. And the buses leaving downtown leave at half-an-hour intervals, 45 minutes past the hour and 15 minutes past the hour, and it's about a 3-minute walk from where we're going to be. Okay, on Saturday, it's also going to be a social from a slightly different time, from 7 till 10. It's going to be at the Aurelia Museum of Art and History. The bus, again, will pick us up at 6:45, and it's going to come back earlier at 10. If you want to take a cab, I will give you the phone number for the local cab company right now. It's called Able Taxi, and their number is area code 705-325-0632. And you can expect about a $20 cab fare if you're coming back from downtown to campus. In terms of the local bus transportation, just a final note on that is that if you are looking to catch the transportation on Sunday, the service begins at 8:45 in the morning and it ends at the ridiculously early 4:15 p.m. on Sunday. So just keep that in mind. I also wanted to give you a heads up that we, on the back of the program, have a bunch of locations, businesses that have agreed to give us discounts, so we encourage you to show your fancy wooden Marge badges. And I just wanted to give a shout out to our lovely research assistants who prepared them, so let's give them a round of applause, appreciation. Because they are, of course, compostable, unlike those plastic ones you get at academic conferences. A couple of locations that are not listed here that are worthy of checking out if you want a coffee or you want to check out other places. They're all on the main strip, which in Aurelia is Mississauga Street. And those 2 locations would be Apple Annie's Cafe and the Mariposa Market, for which I think Aurelia is somewhat famous, as well as the Gourmet Station. So we suggest those 3 locations. 2 other things, that we have had a bit of a room change. So everything that's listed in the program as transpiring in room 2018 has been shifted to 2015. And we will be indicating those changes on the doors for the rooms. And the very final thing is about ride shares. We have some individuals who are either looking for rides or are offering rides. So there will be a sign-up sheet at the registration table to that effect. So feel free to sign it if you have space in your car or if you're looking for a ride. And also Charmine is our rideshare coordinator, so you can talk to her about it. Any questions about the logistical side of things? Okay, great. Thank you very much and welcome again. And I guess we will pass it over. And we would like to, I guess, our RAs to introduce themselves too.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cassidy. I'm a third-year media studies student here at Lakehead University. I've been with Marge since the beginning of my 2nd year, so super exciting, having lots of fun, super stoked for the conference, and hearing lots of cool stuff. Super happy everyone's here.
Yeah, my name's Ellen. I'm also 3rd-year media studies at Lakehead, and I just was hired in April, so I'm very new. Haven't done a lot of research yet, but we've done lots of preparation for the conference. It's really exciting that you're all here, and looking forward to this weekend. Thanks.
So without further ado, we'll turn things over to our panel, and Aruna is going to be moderating.
Hi, everybody. Okay, so we started late, so we're going to get right into it. And we have about, I think we're going to try to get this done in 45 minutes, yeah? Yeah, because we're all tired and it's a late Thursday night. And of course, Aurelia, I'm sure, has lots of things to offer us tonight, so we're gonna hit the town. So thanks for coming. I hope everyone got here safely and well and are feeling fed. It's an honor to be able to present and moderate this panel with all of these very incredible human beings. Gratitude and big thanks to the Aurelia Native Women's organization for opening and for welcoming us to gather and share this work today here. Tonight we will hear from Pascale Diverlus, Sheila, Sampath, and Nicky about the ways that activist and alternative media can be used to challenge and disrupt the ways that mainstream media often ignores, molds, and distorts our communities and realities. We also hope to address the gaps, issues, and ways that we as media activists can often replicate oppressive practices in our own practice. Living in a saturated age of access to information, we hope to further interrogate how we can utilize activist and alternative media as a source of liberation, access, and power to support our movements and communities. This panel will look at the role of activist media and liberation movements. So we're bringing together various elements of activist media and liberation movements. Our panelists have involvement in both organizing and creating media. For this panel, our panelists will reflect on the current political moment and the role of activist media. And we will have a Q&A after we hear from the panel and hope to build what we hope is a good base for conversations in the conference that are to come. So before we begin also, we are recording and live streaming, but they're only recording all of your backs. So no one's face will be shown unless you get up and face the camera. But the panelists, you are all over the internet right now, so too late. So please feel free to also share the link for the Marge website on social media right now, and then maybe put down your phone so you can absorb all the goodness. But if you could let people know that they can be online and watch it, that'd be great, so they can also link up and we should big up this conference. So I'm gonna do the bios quickly of all the panelists, and then we're gonna go right into the questions. The way that we're structuring today's panel is not the regular, like everyone gives a speech, but we're gonna try to have a conversation between the panelists. So I'm gonna ask questions, and you guys can just go buck wild with it. So Nicky is a 24-year-old storyteller, organizer, and skateboarder and born and raised and living in Toronto, and working primarily with Ricochet Media. He has worked with Shit Harper Did, No One Is Illegal, the Natural Law Collective, the Yes Men, Climate Justice Alliance, Vice Media, and his favorite, grassroots Indigenous activists. Often performing as an embedded journalist, Nicky finds the right balance between portraying information objectively while still telling a story that the mainstream media won't. Specializing in viral video documentation, Nicky's camera and mic act as a direct line of communication between activists and the public. Pascale, so that's Nicky in the middle. And then Pascale Diverlus is a Haitian-born fourth-year journalism student. She is a previous vice president equity of Ryerson Student Union, where she worked on introducing Ryerson's first women's-only gym time hours and worked aggressively for the university to implement an inclusive and progressive sexual assault policy. Pascale is the current vice president of the United Black Students at Ryerson, a student group committed to challenging anti-Black racism on campus. She's also one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter Toronto. Pascale is an organizer, writer, and semi-professional twerker. Yes. She is a revolutionist and a firm believer that we will win. Sheila Sampath, to my right over here, is an artist, educator, and activist living and working in Toronto. She is the editorial and art director of Shameless magazine, principal and creative director at The Public, and an assistant professor in the Faculty of Design at OCAD University. Her work centers around feminism, anti-racism, and decolonization. This panel, come on. Yeah. So I'm going to ask, I'm going to probably just do 3 questions. I have 5, but I think we can do 3. And I'm going to just open up. You can all decide who wants to take what, okay? So the first one is, in your experience, what has been the role of activist media in supporting or furthering the aims of fighting against capitalism, white supremacy, anti-Black racism, patriarchy, colonization, homophobia, transphobia, all the things that fuck us up on a daily? So who wants to take that first big question?
No pressure.
There's also that mic over there if you want that one.
This one kind of makes me feel like Beyonce, so I'm going to choose this one. Hi. I think to properly explain that, I have to explain what happened at our very first action as Black Lives Matter Toronto. So Mike Brown had been murdered in the States. His family and organizers in Ferguson had asked that, around the world, there be solidarity actions within 24 hours of a verdict coming out of whether or not his murderer was going to be indicted. And so, we planned this action, 3,000 people, no big deal, came out. And before, when we were promoting it, we promoted it within a span of a night. Literally the single request we had asked of allies was not to speak to media. We wanted this one opportunity for us to center our voices, center our experiences, talk about what this meant for us, for Black people. And it blew up. Literally that little portion of the About page blew up. In between a night, I did upwards of like 25, 30 interviews. And every single one of them asked why we were not letting white people speak. And it was alarming to me. It was frustrating to me that, here we were mourning the murder of an 18-year-old teenager, and what we were focusing on was the fact that we had asked allies not to speak. That was, I think, my first real introduction into, not my first real one, but really like personal introduction into how the media, the mainstream media, will take whatever it is that you were doing and flip it around on you. And then from there, we kind of, we made up this thing called a white list. And whenever journalists would be problematic or disrespect us or, try to turn things around on them, we would just add them to this list and then never do interviews with them. And we're like, don't fuck with us. And what we did instead was prioritize the smaller publications, those who are actually in our community, that were from our community, that involved people who looked like us, that involved those that were trying to center our voices. And it makes a light year of difference, like talking to somebody that's on your side and wants to hear actually what this means to you is so different than trying to convince a mainstream media publication as to why, Black lives actually do matter. It is only through working with those community groups that we've seen an alliance that is able to get our message across, that really centers our voices. Yeah, and they've been really great, and throughout this past 2 years of our existence of showing up, showing out, recording everything, being there when we're getting harassed by police, and taking out their cameras real quick, and sharing that and letting us know that they are on our side. We learned very, very, very early on that mainstream media is not on our side. It is not going to get our message across, and it is not really here for us. But what we can do is we can prioritize those journalists that are coming from our communities, that are there standing with us, that are there at the actions, the rallies, the marches, and are really interested in actually centering our experiences and our voices.
So mainstream media blowing it is pretty much the question? That's a tough one. Yeah. So what I try and focus on with my media is to really to really accurately tell the story of activists, and to do so in really hearing their voice, seeing their face, in a very kind of intimate way, which is, I think, very different from what we've seen traditionally, just thinking of previous Indigenous uprisings like Oka and Gussison Lake. Gussison Lake specifically, most people don't know about it, but it was in 1995 in BC. It was the largest paramilitary operation in Canadian history. And that was started when a group of Sundancers had been doing their Sundance in an area for years, and then there was whatever. Basically what happened was it turned into a huge standoff, and one of the folks actually got asylum in the States. Canada tried to extradite him. And the judge pointed out that the RCMP engaged in a smear and disinformation campaign, and sealed off all the media from getting inside. So that the media was just taking information face value from the police, and obviously they were portraying these people as terrorists when really they were sun dancers engaging in traditional ceremony. Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of what I try and combat with my media. Like recently there was an occupation of the Indigenous Northern Affairs Canada building for 8 days in Toronto that I was embedded in the whole time. And that was basically like, what I was doing there was just trying to like, it was families there, you know? They were not militants, they were not terrorists, they were families. And they were like upset about suicide rates up north, which is like very understandable. So yeah, I mean, I think just like portraying people accurately and not taking information from cops who lie.
Thanks. Actually, I'm thinking I'm going to use the handheld one. You don't have to lean forward. Yeah, so, okay, that's loud. So maybe I'll also give a bit of background as to Shameless and what Shameless does. So Shameless is a feminist magazine for teen girls and trans youth. We exist in print. I have some print copies here. And we publish 3 times a year. And then we also have a website and a blog. And we're 100% volunteer run. And we've been around for 11 years, which is the same amount of time as Upping the Ante. And I'm really sad, Charmaine, that you're on your last issue, but we'll talk about it later. Yeah, so in the case of Shameless, I think that there's a few things, I guess, in terms of the role of activist media versus everything. Was that basically the question? In our case, we're really interested in the role radical and activist media can play in creating entry points to activism. And so I've been doing activist work pretty intensely for the last 15 years of my life, and I love it. But I also find that the more we get into it, the more we kind of form an in-group versus an out-group. One of the amazing things about getting to work on a youth publication is to start from scratch with new generations of folks and to explain what things are, to create kind of safer spaces through our pages. And so we have, really radical content for like 13-year-old girls and trans youth. We have articles on like the prison industrial complex and like youth and sex work. But we also explain what those things are and why we feel the way we do about them. And so that kind of like creating that entry point is really, really central to what we do. And it's also a way of making our communities stronger and more inviting and more engaging. The other thing I think for us is building capacity. We're a real thing, like we're a real tangible thing, which is one of the exciting things about being a print publication. And it gives us a lot of legitimacy, which is kind of false legitimacy, but you have to fake it to make it. And one of the cool things about that is that we get to publish like new writers, like inexperienced writers, right? Writers from communities. And so rather than telling other people's stories, we're also really invested in creating opportunities and building capacity and involving like skill sharing in kind of embedded into our editorial process, so that we're also creating a new kind of, I guess, team of journalists that have journalist skills that are coming from activist communities versus trying to add that on to folks that are coming at it from the other side. I think the other thing is that radical media is a space to create alternatives. I've done a lot of media literacy workshops where I work with young people and we talk about what's messed up about, magazines, television, movies, all of those kinds of things. And I think it's really important to take time to dismantle that stuff and have conversations about it. I also think it's really great to create alternatives and to be able to have a publication that is a safer space is, I think it's just as important, if not a little more so, than talking about what's messed up about the world that we're in. I think it's nice to show that there's an alternative, there's a speculative aspect to that, which I find really, I think it's really important.
A lot of time what happens, and just a little bit about myself, I am the news editor for Indigenous Waves radio show, and I've been doing radio for many years. And I also am the advice columnist for Shameless magazine. So
good advice.
if you need advice, yeah, I got you. So So I think that also what happens a lot of time is that there are huge gaps, right? Because activist media is activist media, and it's people volunteering, it's people who are like literally on the ground every day doing that work. Like at Tent City, there were people there every day, you know, like I would like sending out messages and sending out pictures of like, we're here, come out, you know, like, so it actually means that, you know, there's a lot of people who are doing a lot of things who don't have resources, who are just doing that with whatever data they have on their phone that day. So how, given the lack of resources that we have in this community, that many media projects and organizations struggle with, as we're hearing as well, how are ways that media activists could do this work either more effectively, or what in our movements, and specifically how you've seen it happen on the ground, how could it have been more effective, knowing the lack of resources that we have?
Through social media, like social media really has, like, it is like, it's the literally like the social media generation. Like I call it the Tumblr generation, because you know, there's this wave of people who are able to do their activism literally from behind a computer screen, and it does wonders. It is through social media that, you know, we've been able to get the notice that we've been able to learn names of people who've been killed that we've never would have known otherwise. Social media has created a platform for us to amplify our voices, to give, you know, it's not everyone that can be on the ground with us, and we recognize that. It's not everyone, you know, that can occupy police headquarters for 15 days. It's not accessible, but there are other ways that folks can plug in, and they've seen that and they've used that. Everything from, you know, just putting up pictures, retweeting, liking a page, to making their own media. We had, so for folks who don't know, about a month ago, Black Lives Matter Toronto held a 15-day occupation outside police headquarters to protest the murder of Andrew Loku and the non-charge on the officer who murdered him. And, you know, day in and day out, we would get like these independent, random folks that would come and be like, I'm a storyteller, or I'm a documentarian, I'm a videographer, I'm this, this is how I can contribute to what the work that you are doing. They realize that, you know, at the front lines is not where everyone needs to be, but there are so many holes and so many gaps where they can fill themselves in solely just based off the talent and the things that they have taught themselves. And that's how I think people kind of filled in the gap.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that for sure. And then also like building relationships. Like social media is incredibly useful for building relationships, but yeah, like there's really amazing stuff happening between like Black and Indigenous solidarity, and like the police headquarters occupation, and then the INAC occupation right after, the Indigenous Northern Affairs occupation. Like, I think those were kind of motivating each other, and like when you don't feel like you're doing something alone, it's like a lot more. Yeah, I think isolation is like the biggest danger in activism. And then like even that, speaking to like when you're out shooting, like if I'm gonna go cover something, like trying to have like a sound guy or like a host or like whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to echo what Pascale was saying. Yeah, I think a lot of times when we talk about resources, we are forced to talk about capital. And one of the things that doing activist work for a really long time and working on Shameless has taught me is that, and I think you know, I found the occupation of police headquarters really, really, really inspiring about this, because it was like, resources didn't have to be capital. You know, people could come and spend time if they could do that. People who weren't able to come down could spread messages on social media. People could bring what they had. Like, I had extra leggings, and so I'm like, here's some leggings. Like, it was actually like it was like one of the first movements I've seen in a really long time that was like really, really accessible. So like, congratulations on that. And I think like in terms of, you know, Shameless, we also try to think about resources outside of capital as well, right? And so, you know, some people, like when new folks come on board, you know, we're like, what do you want to do? And we can't pay you. Like, that's a thing we don't have. We don't have money. So it's like, we can write you letters, we can make up fancy titles for you, we can, you know, like you can be whatever you want to be at Shameless, because we just make up our own titles all the time. So I've written a lot of reference letters for like graduate programs and jobs and stuff like that. But like those are other forms of, like those are other ways we can kind of make exchanges. And I think that trying to think about resources outside of capital is like a helpful way of like movement building and anti-capitalist movement building sort of specifically. And I think that's something that a lot of alternative media does really, really, really well, because none of us have money, especially those of us who do print. And so, yeah, just trying to think of like the kinds of skills, and at Shameless we do tons and tons of skill shares with each other. And so I actually don't have a journalism background, and then I ended up like editing this magazine, and I learned from my coworkers, and they didn't know how to do other things, and I taught them. And it's kind of like, I don't know, we think of that as something that has weight and has value. And so when we can't actually exchange money, we're able to exchange these other things. And when you look at all the skill sets that people hold, all the different kinds of things that people are able to share, whether they're tangible things or intangible things or community or support, I think our resources are actually a lot. Like, I think our activist movements have a lot going for us.
So I actually want to hear a little bit more about so you've given a lot of great examples of how BLM how media and social media has been useful for BLM. And I would like to hear other examples of how activist media has been not just a crucial part of it, but like it wouldn't have happened if. So for all three of you, in terms of like Shameless and in terms of the work that you're doing for Ricochet. So can I get some examples of I find that examples often are useful because it gives us an opportunity to imagine what has happened and what can happen. In terms of the resources that we have, or not just monetarily, but I mean in terms of our people power. Can I get some examples of how social and activist media has amplified your work or challenged the greater mainstream media?
So recently, after our occupation, we really pushed the buttons with the province and trying to get like a response from them, but also we wanted them to meet with the public. We wanted them to have consultations with Black Torontonians to hear their perspective of what it is like to be a Black person living in the city, in the city of Toronto, but also in the province of Ontario. And so, you know, we sat down with the folks that were going to be leading it, and, you know, we laid out what, before even like having the meeting, we're like, these are the demands going into it, you know, ensuring that it's accessible, that we have childcare, stuff like that. And something that we had outlined as a demand is how and where they do outreach. And, you know, they were really pumped, like, yeah, 100%, you know, we'll contact CBC and we'll contact the Toronto Star, whatever. But for us, I was like, that's not a priority. Of course, those people are always going to come. But what we need to do actually is target the media that is smaller. We need to target the community networks, the radio stations, the small papers, the newsletters, like places like that reach certain amount of people that will never reach the folks that are watching CBC. The folks that are watching CBC, we hear from them all the time. You know, it's not that hard to reach them, but it's a lot harder to, you know, to reach the single queer mom that only reads a Pride magazine or Share magazine, and we have to ensure that you know, in the outreach, if you're trying to actually get our people or reach our people, you have to meet them where they're at in the media that they are interested in. Yeah, and it's been really dope to see them actually put emphasis on reaching out to those who are at the absolute corners of our community, at the margins of our community, who are continuously pushed out, and engaging those forms of media that are trying to get our voices out.
I'm going to leak a few trade secrets. So yeah, one of the biggest helps with doing like videos or whatever, or articles, anything, is having like activist networks to immediately share them out on. So working with Shit Harper did, and working with Ricochet Media, or sorry, Occupy Canada. I never worked with them, but like I got on their admin panel. but just like having like access to different Facebook pages that you can immediately share things, so they kind of immediately go viral. That's really great. And then so, I mean, you could get those things by, doing things like never saying no to someone if they're like involved in an organization that you think you might be able to get some sway in with, to be able to have access to their social media. And then another thing is like Facebook uploading videos is really great because it auto plays, and like 80% of people or whatever get their news through phones now. So then even going a step further and like having your very first shot be kind of clickbait, and like even if it's like, yeah, just like something that's going to draw attention. Yeah, just like you see something immediately, the video is auto playing, and if it's like something shocking, like one of the INAC days, it was like at the Occupation of the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada office, it was like firefighters came through because we were like smudging. So that was just like, I put that as the first shot, and that video did really well just because it, like, if you see something happening that's like traumatic or like crazy or whatever, like it was just firefighters that showed up to like, pretty much we turned them around, but like nothing really happened. But yeah, having something to be able to like kind of shock people into watching the video. And then, yeah, just those media networks. And yeah, I love video because it's like, I think that's kind of where things are headed a bit. And there's like there can be a lot of production there, but it can be cut down. And like, it's so many little skills that just need to be clumped together, like relationship building or video editing, interviewing, yada, yada. And I think the problem is just task initiation, right? Just like learning all those different skills. They're not hard, they're just like kind of simple skills, but having those and then having the relationships in place, I think is like very effective.
So the question was, how has activist media fueled our work, right?
Yeah, so the examples that you have of that.
Yeah. So I think I had a bit of trouble with the question at first because I was thinking, I'm like, our work is to produce activist media, and so activist media helps that. But as I was thinking about it and hearing folks talking, I think our work is actually about creating safe spaces for youth through media. And for us, I don't know if like the examples of us, like we've never really started a viral hashtag. We've never really, I mean, we're on social media. We use Twitter, and we have a really fun Tumblr. It's the Tumblr generation. It's the age of Tumblr. Yeah, so we have a pretty active Tumblr. I think we're on Facebook too. I know we're on Facebook because I'm our friend. But yeah. And Aruna, you're our friend too, yeah. We have two friends here. But I think for us, it's actually not so much about numbers. We have chosen to primarily be a print publication because I think, and most of us are adults. We're adults. We have an adult staff, and then we have a youth advisory board. And so whenever we interview adults to come on board, we are like, why do you want to work for Shameless? And then they always say, oh, because I remember what it was like to be a teen, and I wish I had this magazine when I was a teen. And that's like the thing every single person that is involved with Shameless consistently says. And I think that we all as a staff sort of remember what it was like to be alienated by mainstream media when we were younger. Like we remember what it's like to be like folks of color or queer or trans or all of those things, or disabled, like any, and just kind of, reading 17 Bop or whatever and just being like, this is not for me. And I feel like the worst. And so I think that's a part of why we continue working on it. And I think in terms of, how we go about doing things specifically, I think we're actually about that connection. Like we're not there for everybody, and we don't need or want to be. I think we actually want to be there for youth when they're going through a hard time and they feel alienated by the world. And so in terms of how specifically we do that, I mean, we are online, people can find us, we have an active blog, we have podcasts and things like that. But actually we reach the most youth by being present in our communities. I do tons of class talks. I go to high schools, like probably once a month, like some different high school, I go in for like a free media literacy workshop around Toronto. We finally got our first grant in 11 years, and we used it to fund Shameless Youth Advisory Board. So we pay youth $15 an hour to come in, and we give them skill shares. It's like basically a skill share, and then they kind of advise on the magazine, and we teach them like media creation skills. And so that's actually where the connection is. And so we don't actually have these huge success stories of like we reach like 8,000 youth and like hashtag Shameless rocks. Although if any of you want to start that tonight, like go for it. But I think it's actually like a really deeply personal thing, and sometimes those metrics don't always apply. And being small and being kind of accessible in these ways where like I get all the email and I respond to it all the time. It's like we get to youth because like a teacher gave like a kid a copy of Shameless, or their best friend did, or they saw it in a library, or they went to chapters and were looking for 17 Bop, but this was next to it. And I think just being present and consistent and not giving up has done a lot for us, right? And it's kind of like when you're talking to young people and you're like I'm here if you need anything, and then they're like no, and then like the next day you're like I'm here if you need anything. So we've been like doing that for 11 years, right? So I think we just haven't abandoned that, even when we probably should have. Like our numbers probably said we should have like 6 years ago, you know. And now we get like a lot of email, you know, like I'd say maybe like 2 to 3 emails a week from like a young person or a relative of a young person being like, you know, I saw this. And it's actually not, it's just being present and being consistent and doing it because it's important, and you know that it's important even if they don't know it's important yet. And then now they do know it's important, and it's super cool. Yeah.
I have all the fuzzy feelings away.
Aruna's a really good advice columnist also, if any of you have feelings and want to talk to her.
Yeah, I love feelings. Okay, so yeah, thank you for that. I think that it's really important that, I think it's really hard doing organizing in general, but then also when you're put against very huge mainstream ways of understanding success and media making, it's always important to hear how those things are actually working, and that they are working. And 11 years later, we have this incredible publication, and it has fueled movements and moved them forward. So those examples are really important. Thank you for that. At the same time, we also have lots of gaps. And I think there's a lot of places where, you know, well-intentioned folks also are, you know, a lot of people have access to an iPhone and put lots of things out there that can be really harmful. So my next question, because I think it's important to challenge ourselves as much as it is to congratulate ourselves. And I'm all for, you know, really making sure that we don't recreate really awful things that we're trying to fight against. What is the challenge that you've experienced with activist-based peoples, media makers, or how has something either intentional or unintentional been harmful to your work or movements?
So I think one of the biggest things that we really, really struggle with is the challenge of like unpaid labor. Like it's like a huge, huge thing. And I mean, we're gonna be talking about a session on Saturday. It's a plug, but I think it raises a lot of issues, right? Because it's like who tends to do unpaid work, right? And so yeah, like Shameless is run by women and trans folks, mostly of color, mostly queer. So what does that mean, right? And then also who's allowed to participate in that, right? So when we kind of have this broader mandate of creating spaces for new emerging writers, if you're working class poor, you don't have time to write for free, you know, whatever is going on in your life, you can't do that, then your voice doesn't get represented, right? So as much as we try to have this like super democratic space, it isn't, right? Like we're replicating the same things through unpaid labor, right? So who's allowed to participate? And I think in terms of overcoming that, it's been really, really challenging, partially because we don't have money, right? And yeah, and so I think to be honest, that's like one of the biggest things. I think historically with Shameless, also like not having, in the past we haven't always had a clear vision or a clear mandate, or there's been this focus on product, like we want to create a really good magazine versus we want to create a really good like political magazine, right? So before, I think when Shameless first started, it was an alternative magazine for teens, and then I think it went through a period where it was like a second wave white feminist magazine. It was just like so problematic, and then all the people of color, including myself, were like, we're leaving, and then like the co-founders were like, you take it. And so yeah, like even like using terms like feminist and not having a shared definition of what that means, right? Because it can mean like lean in, and it could also mean like anti-capitalist, decolonial, like intersectional, like coolness. And so yeah, I think like constantly, yeah, so the first answer is the stuff around capital and all of the stuff that embodies. And then I think the second answer is also like thinking about politics in a way that's responsive and reflective. And one of the really great things about working in media, especially like a publication, is that it is serial. And so it's like a long-term relationship, right? And you have the opportunity to constantly define and redefine and redefine and redefine your politics. And if you're really rigid in what that means, like if you're really rigid in your definition of feminism, then that also doesn't get to grow as the world around you grows. And I think we've gotten to a place where with that, we're pretty good in terms of being like, yeah, we're a feminist magazine, but what feminist means to us changes as new things come up, right? Like to us, like being feminist, like means like supporting certain like other movements, right? But I think that in the past, like feminist meant something like very rigid, and this is what it means, and these are its boundaries. And then as the world changed or new things came up, I don't think we always had the strongest responses to those. So I think like also engaging in processes of ongoing self-reflection and like visioning and taking strong editorial stances on things, like choosing intentionally what to support, what not to support, what other media organizations to boycott, and it's like there's a lot of feminist drama with Rabble, which we can talk about. But yeah, like those kinds of sort of intentional choices, right? And I think that like having a mandate, but also constantly reflecting on that mandate it's a challenge, but I think it's a really important one.
Yeah, I just want to echo what you said, doing unpaid work. I mean, I'm a journalist myself, I'm like a journalism student, and the pieces I want to write about, the publications I want to write for are all unpaid, but like, how am I do that? How am I do that paying tuition, paying my rent, taking care of my business? It's just, it's inaccessible. And so you never will hear voices like mine because I can't afford to do it for free.
I would say like one of my biggest challenges is like this like myth of objectivity, that like all journalists have to have this like completely impartial, yeah, I mean I think that completely sucks all the life out of journalism too, right? Like of course I report on issues because I care about them. That doesn't mean I can't still project information objectively. Like I used to work with Vice, and like they didn't even want me like giving photos or videos to like the activists that I was reporting on, and like I was doing like Indigenous solidarity stuff, and like for a white dude to come in and like shoot photos of like Indigenous people doing their thing and like not share them is like kind of like perpetuating colonialism for sure. And so yeah, I mean I've been attacked for like, you know, I was inside INAC for 8 days and like people were calling me like a supporter, and hell yeah, I'm a supporter, but like I still try and present these videos, like I mean I don't put myself in the videos at all, I just literally like listen to people talk or like listen to things that I've heard them say and then like reiterate them, ask people to reiterate them. So just, I mean, yeah, it's like Ricochet is an accredited media outlet, so it's like not, I guess, specifically activist media or radical media. I mean, we have an editorial position in support of Indigenous rights and an editorial position like against police brutality, but still trying to like play that, you know, accredited journalist card and like be able to wear that hat is like, yeah, there's a bit of a fine line between doing that and then also working with activists.
So we are coming to the last about 5 to 10 minutes of this. So I have one last very quick question. I know you have to also leave soon. If you had one thing that you wanted to say to folks who are doing this organizing, activist media every single day, a part of their like life and practice and politic, what are some things that you need to happen or need to see different or challenge them on? I know it's a hard question. Yeah.
So, sorry, are you asking for us to give advice? Or
no, just something that you were like, I need activist organizers or media organizers or media activists to do this, or to think about this, or to challenge themselves on this.
Malcolm X said a very beautiful quote, and I'm not gonna say it exactly, but I'm gonna sum it up. But he basically said that media will have you conflating who is the oppressor and who is the oppressed. And I think as journalists, we have to recognize that. We have to be able to differentiate that. We have to also realize whose stories have been told over and over and over and over again, whose voices are continuously pushed out and left out and neglected. We have to recognize when sometimes we need to take a step back, and sometimes it's not us that should be telling this story. Sometimes it's not our story to tell, that it's not accurate if it's coming from our mouths, that sometimes we have to give up that control. And sometimes, for the sake of an issue or for the sake of somebody feeling comfortable with sharing their experiences, we have to give up control. As journalists, we can't, you know what I mean? Like, we can't control everything that's coming out of somebody's mouth, and we have to respect that. Yeah, I think as being a journalism student and also being on the flip side and having to deal with a lot of media, that's something that I think we just need to drill into our head till it hits home.
Yeah, this is something I think about a lot, and probably also something that I should check myself on. But kind of celebritizing activists. So in the work that I do of really trying to give a good voice, really good sound and picture, and really see these activists and see what's going on with them. That can also play a role of kind of putting them on this pedestal and sort of celebrity culture worship. And then as soon as you do that, that sets up barriers. And activism is about a collective, right? There's not one person doing everything. It's always it's always a culmination of people coming together that gets shit done. So, and then even speaking to that, to the work that you do, just be replaceable, I guess, is we need roadmaps, not monuments, right? Is there's so much work to do and so much to learn that if one person is doing everything and not trying to Skillshare, so I guess taking time to Skillshare, even if you don't want to, or you don't, you're too busy filming, try and at least have some time for relationship building and skill sharing, because you can do a video and put it out, but if no one is backing it or feels involved, then that's just creating barriers, right?
Yeah, I think folks need to listen to the people that you're speaking to and for, and make sure that the people you're speaking to are also involved in the sort of process. I think also engaging in ongoing processes of self-reflection in terms of your politics, your editorial, your processes, your structures, those kinds of things, so that you don't replicate capitalism. I think also working to make ourselves obsolete. I really, really want to live in a world where I don't do activist media. I just really want to live in a world where activism isn't necessary and doesn't feel so intense and personal and all of the feelings. And I think it's really important. I think sometimes, when we identify as activists, when we identify as media makers, a lot of our identity is sort of wrapped up in that. But we also have to sort of dream of the speculative world that we're all sort of working for and think about what it means to make ourselves obsolete. I think also in the meantime, connecting with each other, and this conference is a really great opportunity for that. But in the last few years, we've gotten to connect with Upping the Ante and a few other publications, and that's been a really actually wonderful thing in terms of sharing across publications and sharing resources and talking about struggles and seeing things. It's not so that we're not repeating each other's mistakes, right? And maybe if we can't do it, you guys can, and if you can't do it, we can. So thinking collectively in terms of your organization, your structure, your collective, but also thinking collectively sort of more broadly, and that maybe you don't have to do this work, and it would be great if you don't, and it'd be great if all of us wouldn't have to. So that's about it.
Thanks. So what I'm hoping to do, and because one of our panelists do have to leave soon, if there are questions from or discussion, or people want to ask anything, or if any of you have questions, vice versa, we we can maybe open it up to that. Anybody have any questions? So I'm just going to repeat the question just in case people didn't hear, but what was asked was how do we reach all of you, if that isn't already possible?
Yeah, you can reach Black Lives Matter Toronto at blacklivesmatterto@gmail.com. We also have a Facebook page, and it's just Black Lives Matter Toronto Coalition. You can reach me personally at my personal email at pascale@gmail. I'm also on Instagram if you want to add that up too. I got some nice selfies up there.
That's radical media.
My email address is nicky@ricochet.media, Nicky.
Shameless is online on Twitter. We're at Shameless Mag. On the World Wide Web, we're shamelessmag.com. I'm on Twitter at Sheila, and my email address is sheila@shamelessmag.com, and the general Shameless email address is talkingback@shamelessmag.com. Also, I'm here all weekend, so that's also a great way to get in touch.
IRL. Anybody else? Yep. So how do we feel about, okay. This will be interesting.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Stefania. I really loved the panel. I was just a little puzzled by the sort of celebratory tones when talking about social media. Where I come from in activism, I've always been concerned with creating infrastructure that would reflect, mirror, if you want, the values that we stand for as activists. And social media strike me as exactly the opposite. I mean, they're owned by big corporations, they are centralized, they're proprietary, and so on and so forth. So I was wondering whether in the age of social media we don't need any more infrastructures, our own alternative infrastructures, or what else? Thank you.
Go for
I'm just trying to collect my thoughts a little bit. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Social media is, definitely owned by these big corporations and stuff like that. And that's true. But what I have seen come out of social media, and we could definitely have differing opinions about this, but I've seen people literally be able to take their activism there. I think often we leave activism, like we say activism is just, being at the forefront or, doing it is what I do, but folks on social media are able to be met where they are at. They are literally able to build a platform to share their voice and speak their experiences. Social media has opened up the conversation about so many things that we've never been able to see before. This is an example. MTV, do you remember MTV, that thing back in the day? They're still around, who knew? But anyways, they have this new show that's literally talking about white privilege. And it's something that was based off of like literally social media, hashtags. You feel me? Like something now that is mainstream is based off conversations that were taken from people talking online, right? A lot of the conversations that we say, a lot of the topics are things that that have been founded on online. People have been able to use online as a platform to share these things, and I think that's a beautiful thing. I think it's a beautiful thing when people are able to use something that may be so bad and so ugly and turn it around. Through social media, we've been able to learn of so many names of people who have been taken by police that we would have never learned about before. through social media during Tent City, when we had the 15-day occupation, we saw thousands and thousands of people sending solidarity messages, people from literally around the world, people we would have never been able to connect with in any other way. Social media is how we let everyone know we are alive a lot of times, let them know what we were doing, when we were doing, when we knew that the cops were gonna rush up on us. We would send out a message on social media being like, this is where we're at, come through as soon as you can with cameras, right? Yeah, like I said, like maybe it's because I really am part of the Tumblr generation, so I'm like, woohoo, social media. But I genuinely think it has opened so much doors. As a journalism student, I often hear, mostly from my immigrant parents, how journalism is not a real degree. And I'm like, how can you say that? Journalism is literally everywhere. If you open up your phones, you go on Snapchat. Who here has Snapchat? Okay, not that many of us. But like even on Snapchat at the very top, there are news publications that people have been able to write for and shit. Like literally social media has opened up the door in so many different ways. Everything from like beauty tips, you know, like social media has opened up that door for so many things. And so while I agree that, you know, there's something that is founded as something that's bad and big and has brought pain for a lot of people, it has also opened up the door for so many others, movements that have started off a hashtag itself on social media. We've seen build into multiple chapters across the States and Canada and Africa. Yeah, sorry, I just went on like a. Yeah, go ahead.
Just add one thing to that. I think you raise a really good point about, you know, yeah, like these social media being owned by really large corporations. And I think a part of what maybe I'm hearing in your question is also this like engagement with like large corporate structures and engagement with like capitalism, right? And pardon? Yeah, and I mean, I think that these are realities under capitalism, right? And a lot of activism for me is like while we're trying to like dismantle capitalism and while we're trying to like build alternatives to capitalism, I think in the meantime we also have to reduce the harm of capitalism. And for me, a part of harm reduction when it comes to things like what social media can be in terms of all the awful things is also like taking it over and, you know, building on it and turning it into something that's manageable for folks, like in terms of, you know, yeah, when you turn on your computer, you're hearing voices like yours. I also think that, like, for me, social media isn't, like, that's not where community is, but it's a way to build community offline, right? And so, like, a lot of, and I think, I won't speak to Black Lives Matter, but I saw that a lot with Black Lives Matter, right? It was like I got a lot of information from it, and then there was like a physical site, and people came out, like that last rally was like, what was that? Like, you know, please do, yeah.
Is so important that's not the only way we meet our community. Like, not at all. Yeah. Social media also is very inaccessible for folks, but it is a way for us to build on that. And that's multiplied by us being on the ground, doing class talks like this, actually being in barbershops, parks, and stuff like that. You are able to reach thousands and thousands of people.
A part of movement building is meeting folks where they're at, right? And so, yeah, being present, like physically present. I don't think social media should ever replace that, like yes. Like physical presence, or like, you know, even like emails or whatever, right? Like however people want to communicate, phone calls, like passing notes, zines, print publications, whatever, right? I think especially for things that are like youth-driven movements for youth, by youth, so that's also where they're at, you know? And I don't think that it's necessarily helpful to create closed systems that people don't know what, like I think it's helpful to build those, right? But we also have to invite people into them, yes. And a part of inviting them into them is like meeting them where they are right now. So.
Yeah, definitely, like I think meeting people where they're at is like the key, because I think social media is great, but if there's like it has to be based on something that's happening in the streets or like a physical thing. And yeah, I mean, like a lot of what we did at Shit Harper did was like trying to reach young people, and I think one of the things that I learned was like to like find the culture makers or whatever that are like very political or radical or whatever that have these movements already, and like bringing those people together and giving them a platform, because like, yeah, it's hard when you're an artist and you want to like drop political stuff or whatever, but you don't know if that's your audience. If like your audience is going to be like people that are. Bye. Yeah. So. Yeah, giving artists a platform to be inherently political with their work, I think is really cool. Because yeah, like I think a lot of artists who are too political don't get picked up by like big labels, possibly because they're so political. So like, and that's just a great way to build community. Like there's so much that can be done in community, you know, with paying your own artists and having your own events and charging your own cover. And like, doesn't everyone like to go out on weekends anyways? And where's your money going, right? Probably to some like suspect promoter. So yeah, like doing things that keep money in your own community, keep awareness in your own community, and give culture makers the platform that they want, right? To talk about issues that matter.
Thanks for that. Any other questions?
It's a joke.
Sorry? I had a question for... Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. Sure, if you want to. Do you want the mic? Okay. Maybe you two can feel it. Okay, I'll pass it down. Thank you.
It will be more a comment now that she's gone, but I really liked her description of social media, how social media help about like opening new doors and bringing people in activism and stuff like this. But another thing that was mentioned is that most of you work for free, and social media like Facebook, they are traded on the stock exchange and they make a lot of money for this. So I won't talk about the injustice because I think it's obvious for everybody, but like the big question is how can we reappropriate this sphere, like social media? There's the response that we have for some time is the open source, create our own tools, but is there other way, like can we occupy Facebook, like the buildings of Facebook and take over these things? Is there other ways that we can imagine to take over social media and having our own infrastructure, so at least you have money to pay your stuff or whatever. Okay. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can necessarily answer that in terms of like taking over Facebook to like redistribute capital, right? Like I think if maybe that's like a strategy session for like tomorrow, and I'd love to go to that. But I also want to say that I do think that like marginalized people are taking over social media, and it's awesome. Like it is totally awesome. And you know, like Black Twitter is amazing and intense and perfect and brilliant. And you know, like Facebook, I hate Facebook, but I love Facebook too. But it's like, and like Instagram and you know, like seeing young like different types of bodies being represented and things like that. Like I think that there's different forms of, I don't know, I don't love the word occupation, but there's different forms of like taking up space, right? And there's different forms of reclaiming media outlets, right? And I think I don't really have an answer in terms of capital. Like I don't know how to take all the money that Facebook makes and give it to us. Do you have a way of doing that? Oh, okay. no, sorry. This person raised their hand, so I thought maybe. But I do think that the way we're using social media is incredibly, incredibly radical. And I think it's okay to, or it can be radical. And I see that with young people all the time. And I think I think in that way, we're taking this tool that wasn't built for that, and we're kind of making it about that, right? And especially with like young women, trans youth, it's like the way they use social media is to boost self-esteem, to build solidarity, to like call out injustice. And you know, like in Toronto, there was like the whole like Jian Gameshi shit show, and like that like sparked this like huge social media movement about like believing survivors and like opening up conversations about that. Like I mean, there's millions of examples of that, right? But I don't think that that's what like Twitter and Facebook were designed to do. Like, I think that we're also redefining what it was designed to do. I hear the piece around capital and profit, but I also think that, like, I don't know. I think that there's other ways we can take something over, right? Like through representation and through like having space for our voices and through those voices like filtering through to new communities and to using, like, to kind of exploiting those things the way they exploit us to build offline communities that subvert the very values that they adhere to, right? It's a longer game.
I would say crowdfunding, right? Like that's pretty much the way you get paid on social media, to like tell a story and like, have like the crisis, the opportunity and the outcome like laid out very clearly for people. Like if you donate to this thing, we can do this, or like we've already been doing this. Like at Shit Harper did, we raised $38,000 for a documentary called Whoa Canada, which is really good if you guys haven't seen it. And then Ricochet started with $83,000 that they fundraised, and then in fall I helped them raise $16,000 for an Indigenous reporting fund. And then soon we're going to be doing a crowdfunder for a Ricochet video, which I'm sure I'll be spamming you all with. But yeah, I mean, like I've been doing this work with Ricochet for about a year, producing these videos, and like have had the privilege to not really need to get paid for them. But now, like, this platform has been established, and like the work has been done, and it's just like we can point to that, and now we can be like, hey, like, do you guys think we should keep doing this work? Then pay us. And yeah, things like Patreon is a like continuous crowdfunding campaign where you pay like you could pay like $3 a month or whatever, and then if you get enough people to do that, then you can have a budget. So I think crowdfunding is the way.
I know there's a question or a comment here. I just want to also add, I think that often, so I'm just going to premise this with, I've been an organizer for a long time, and I think that what happens also a lot of time is that when you're in it for a long time, and we like feel like we're coming up against the same shit over and over and over and over again, and seeing, Facebook make a lot of money while we're struggling to pay like young people to write really brilliant things is really hard, but also understanding that like those young people like are connecting, right, in ways that we have not been, and the ways that we used to do things, or that I used to do things even 5 years ago, is not how people are organizing now. And things are looking very different, and social media is a huge part of that. And I'm not saying that I'm a proponent of social media at all, but I think that what I've seen happen with Shameless, with Black Lives Matter, with even the work that the INAC takeover, it was amazing. The only way that people were coming out was because of social media, like hands down. And I think that's just a reality of the way that the place that we're at right now. We don't live in small insular communities where I can call up like 10 people and then everyone's gonna call up 10 people and we're all gonna call up 10 people and people are gonna show up. Like that's just not how things are organized anymore. People are like tweeting things and then sending it to their like friends and sending it to their other friends, and that's the kind of way that people are actually organizing at this point in time. And not to say that it's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's just where we're at. And I think if we listen to also young people and ask them like, what are ways that you want to connect, then those are ways that happens. And I mean, at least in Toronto, I don't know how it is in other cities because I'm not there, but in Toronto, because of the way that it's so vast and because of the way that capitalism and gentrification have also separated us, we don't have access to each other or the ways that we would like to build with each other in the ways that other cities have. So just something also that I wanted to add, but here you go.
Hi, I just want to say, first of all, thank you for what you're sharing, and I didn't get to thank the other sister, but I really appreciate it. I'm learning a lot, and definitely taking in what you all are saying. I'm going to continue in the same vein of conversation. I think oftentimes when people lay out a critique of these kinds of media we're talking about, those of us who are very use them a lot, even like I do, sometimes can hear that like, okay, the people are saying don't use social media, or like it's an either or. I got to say, that's not really how I heard either of the comments that were made here. I see these media as media that are like, we can't necessarily cede that territory like any media, or like certain parts of government, that we're not going to cede the territory. So it's not an either or. It's more about the terms. Since we are using these media, since the people are on it, it's like, what kind of terms can we set? And in that regard, that kind of is a good suggestion. Sometimes we operate like these media are these virtual things that don't have a material existence, like buildings. We can occupy them like anywhere else, and we can set terms. And so I just wanted to, one thing I wanted to say is I hope that since we're starting this process this time, maybe that's something we can begin to say, like, what are the terms we actually want to set and dictate to these media as an activist community, and then think about holding them accountable to those terms the same way we would hold the police or anybody else. Something else on that note, though, too, I just heard a comment from a mentor of mine, and the scholar's name is Robert Jensen, and he was talking about, and he was actually on Rising Up. I got to make sure this, which is a show on KPFK by Sonali Kolhatkar, run by two immigrant women. I mean, you know, women in LA. So I just want to shout that radio out. But one thing he said is, should we even call these media social media? Maybe we should stop calling them social media. Sometimes people don't like to play these word games, but it really is important. Like social, I was looking up the etymology of the word social. Social has to do with being like connected, you know, and being like an ally. And these media are really not, they're not actually social, right? I mean, we're using them in a social way, but they're corporate, private media. So let's call them what they are, right? The same is also true of the sharing economy, the so-called sharing economy, ride sharing. That's not ride sharing, right? Ride sharing is what we're going to do today when we go back and forth to these bars, you know, like that's we're going to share the ride. But like Uber is not a ride sharing. It's just somebody selling you. That's the opposite of sharing, actually, right? So anyway, I think like those little linguistic terms, like I think I'm going to stop calling those media social media. I think I'm going to call them what they are, just corporations, which I use a lot, though.
Thank you.
I think that really greatly sums that conversation up. It is, we should just call it what it is. Yeah, I think also part of it is also, I think for me and for a lot of people that I've talked to about this, the pulling apart that we have of the words, but also around just knowing that we haven't dismantled capitalism in the way that we would ideally like. You know, one day we will like live in this lovely place where capitalism doesn't exist and we can like, we don't have, our work is obsolete, you know, what you said earlier. But until then, we have to just be real about the fact that we are, first of all, living on indigenous land that is still not, you know, in indigenous hands in the ways that it should and will be, and has been. And we live in a very like, we live and work and operate in these very particular structures. So calling it what it is for sure, I think. Thank you for that. I'm going to take one more comment question, and then I think we can wrap it up. Yeah, okay. Did you want? Is there anything else? Oh. I think it's you.
Okay. So mine is just, I'd like to pull out something that Sheila had said earlier, right? It's not, no, I'm not testing you. No, I just wanted to pull it out because I thought there were some really great kind of points that came back at what was said, and I just didn't want to lose this gem. But being small, being accessible, being present, being consistent, not giving up has done a lot for the community that you serve. And I think as media activists, we have to have different measures for our own success and stop judging ourselves based on the behaviors and the mannerisms of the corporate media that we're ultimately trying to take down. So that's one comment that I had, and I appreciate what you said, and I just wanted to highlight that. And Nick, I just wanted to push back on something that you said with regard to, and I'm not a video person, so perhaps it's just like an aversion to video, but like the idea of taking that first little thing on Facebook, the loop thing you described, and putting something sensational out there is a way to get, so again, replicating the mannerisms of the mainstream media is like, it hurts my stomach when I hear media activists say stuff like that. So I just wanted to offer that opinion and say that I think a strategic thing that we can do to build and strengthen our movements is to think about ways we can do things differently and ultimately create new models that really reflect the communities that we're serving, even when they're small communities, because that's rich, that's really rich work that you're doing.
Okay, so we're getting to 9:30, so, and I see some very tired faces. And we have a really big conference ahead, so I'm going to, if it's okay with all of you, to wrap it up and wish you all good night. I wanted to thank the panelists, and also if anyone does want to get in touch with Pascale, I have I can write down BLMTO's information and pass that on to you, which I'm sure would be fine. And then, will you both be at the conference later? Okay, great. So they'll both be here. And so thank you so much for being here. And thank you, all of you, for your really important conversations. And have a great conference.